I'm ready whenever.
Okay, so let's begin. It's a pleasure to have Professor Sivaramakrishnan from IIT Bombay. He's currently a professor of mathematics at IIT Bombay, and his main research interests are in the field of combinatorics and spectral graph theory. I think also in theoretical computer science. He's published many research articles and given many invited talks, and he's a regular visitor in our department. Today he's going to speak on spectral graph theory, the graphs and the eigenvalues and the interplay between eigenvalues and graph theoretic properties. So, and some experiments with SAGE. Okay, so over to you, Krishnan. And thank you for accepting our invitation.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'd like to thank Professor Vinayak Joshi for his kind invitation, and also apologize to him because I was supposed to give a talk on Sunday, but somehow there is some issue at my house. Some work had to be done, repair work had to be done on an emergency basis, so I couldn't give it on Sunday. So I asked him for a change, at the 11th hour. That is on Saturday. I told him, Sunday will be tough, and then he was kind enough to shift it to some other day. So I want to put on record my token of gratitude, to and also apologize for the trouble that I caused. He had to move some things. I don't know.
And if you don't mind, you can open your video.
Okay. 1 minute. Yeah. 1 minute. Yeah. Let me just open my video. How do I do? 1 minute. Just give me a minute. I'm not that familiar with this.
It's okay.
No. 1 minute. Yeah, I got it. Is it okay?
Yeah. Fine.
All right. Okay, fine. Okay. So this talk is somewhat basic because I'm going to talk about exploratory research, and it involves some software called Sage. Now Sage has changed its name to Sage Math. Yeah. So it's okay that Sage Math, the advantage is that it's free. Yeah. So important thing is that the Sage Math is free and it's open source. That is, you can look at the code that is being executed when you want to find something, when you run it for something. Let's say find the determinant, find the eigenvalues, whatever. Yeah. See, in general, if you use, there are other software which are available like Maple, Mathematica, MATLAB, quite a few of them. But for them, no, they just give you an executable file. They don't give you the source code. So you run it on some example. How do you know it's correct? It gives you some output. How do you know it's correct? You just have to believe them because you paid 10 lakhs. So the proof is, the fact that you paid 10 lakhs, that's the proof. Whereas here, the source is open. That is, you can inspect the source code. It's written in this language called Python. So it's free, open source. So you can inspect the source code. You can find, how people are programming. And on top of it, you can contribute if you want. And to boot, it knows a lot of higher math. So by higher math, I mean things which are typically a little more complex to program. For example, if you want to find the characteristic polynomial of a matrix, we can do it, but it knows way more than all this. So in that sense, this Sage Math is a very, very good tool to have just for confirmation purposes. So of course, finally we have to prove something, but before we prove something, how do we decide on what to prove? So the trouble most of the times is to come up with a statement on what to prove. Once you've decided that this is the statement you want to prove, then you just have to spend a couple of sleepless nights with coffee and then you will get the proof. But the main bottleneck is to decide what you have to prove, because there are so many statements and it's not clear what is the correct statement to pull out of. So from these several choices that you have, what is the correct statement that you want? That is usually the hard thing. All right. Yeah. So one minute, let me go down page down. Okay. So this I see this too is good. So 1 minute, let me see. I thought there was a page view.
So your slides is
yeah, it's somehow opening in the browser. 1 minute, let me try to open it in the so that it 1 minute. Can I just try opening in another?
Yeah, sure.
Just 1 minute. If I open it in a I don't know why it's opening in a browser rather than. Is there a way to make this in a, so that it comes page down? No, page down. Page down just. Okay. I got it. I knew. Okay, fine. Okay. Is it okay now? Yeah. Okay. So this is a quote from.
No, we are not able to see your.
Oh, you're not able to see?
Yeah.
No, sir.
You'll have to share your screen.
Okay. Did I stop sharing? Okay. Sorry.
I think so.
Yeah. 1 minute. Okay. So I have this. There's my Zoom. Share screen. Is this clear?
Yes.
Screen
Yes.
clear now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All
Yes,
right.
sir.
So I should 1 minute. Let me go to the screen. Okay. So math is an experimental science according to this Professor Zeilberger, who is a combinatorialist and whom I admire. So he's still alive. He's at Rutgers University, and he does a lot of experiment. He has given a lot of courses on what he calls experimental math. So even if you don't agree fully with him, it's okay. Even if you are willing to agree, let's say a tenth with him, that's still okay. Because he calls it, you should do a lot of experiments. He encourages people to do experiments, and the lab for us is, any desktop, any source, any computer is good enough for us. We don't need any high tech equipment. All we need is some program to run. Yeah. All right. So in my opinion, if you look at exploratory research, so you should know some background math, that that is required, and then you have to experiment with ideas. This is you feel, maybe there is something more general, or you feel, this is a special case of something, or what about some other variant. If you want to try variants, this is the good thing to do is, if you know something, then you can try to apply some change to that problem and try to see, what if you change this problem slightly here. So that experimentation, there is some crucial component. How do you come up with what is a good generalization or what is a good variant? That that comes with experience. With you, firstly you hang around with somebody, then they'll teach you a few things, then you really figure out that, oh, this is what this is a good idea to try. These kind of ideas have yielded results, so let's try some idea or some variant of the idea or something. And there is no theorem there that if it works for some context, it will work in another context. So you have to keep trying a lot here. So here the point is, you have to try, if you try 20, you may get one of them. So in fact, if you read Terence Tao's post, he says, if you want to write more papers, you have to bump up your failure rate. So if you fail 500 times, that means you've tried 500, then at least you will succeed 15. So they asked him, how do you write some 20 papers a year? So he says, you only see my successes. You only see the 20 successes. You don't see the 500 failures. If you don't know the 500 failures, you will see how lousy I am. My success rate is very poor, but you think it's so good because, I'm trying a lot. So essentially you have to, if you want to bump up your success rate, you have to bump up your attempt rate, in which case, your failure rate will also go up. So that's there. That's always there. So this experimenting with ideas, this is the hardest part. There is no substitute for this. And then there is no formula for this. You have to try new things here. So here I recommend that you use Sage to save time, to try more examples, to gain confidence, to prove a statement, all these things. For all these kind of tasks, you can use some programming language, in particular something like Sage. There are other free variants also. So, there is a SciPy, scientific Python. There are quite a few things. So you can try whatever suits your purpose. Generally, it's a good idea to keep trying and to keep working, because you have to be active. That's the only thing. And the other thing I wanted to say is, if there are any questions at any time, please feel free to stop me. Because I should have said this and right at the outset. Somehow I just missed it. So let me just say it even as now. So if there are any questions at any point of time, feel free to let me know. Okay. So, and then now if you have some examples, a set of examples in your bag, it always helps to try to observe some patterns. And most of mathematics is pattern matching. And then of course you try to prove or disprove a result. This is the hard part, as I said here, is it's to observe some pattern. So there is no template. We don't have any, if this happens, then we have a result. There is nothing like that. There is those are the slightly gray areas. That is, it's not clear what to do. But in general, this is a good template. That is, you try to some background math, then you try to experiment with ideas, and then you try to prove or disprove a result. This is the standard template. And when you're not sure, which is the case most of the time, most of us are not sure. I have never heard of somebody who has, an idea and is looking for a problem to apply it. Always, we have problems which we are unable to solve. We are after something, some statement seems to be true. We are always, we've tried a few more examples. It seems to be true, and but we don't know how to prove it. That seems to be the case always. Universally, that seems to be the case. All right. So in this, if you, how do you come up with statements? All that that the Sage can help. It will accelerate your the rate at which you will converge to the correct statement that you wish to prove. All that can be accelerated. You can get to it quickly. That's the point. All right. So I'm going to talk about this one result of mine which I had gotten. So this Q analog of this Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya's theorem. Yeah. So this is GHH stands for Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya. So this is a story for this, and I'll tell you the whole story. The story is interesting, and this was the first time I had done this, and I had done one more thing before I met Professor Bapat from ISI Delhi, and then we collaborated, for about a decade, starting from 2010 to 2020 or something like that. I mean, we've still not stopped. I mean, we're still doing some work, but that it really helped for me to get something going and then start talking to somebody. Yeah. So this is what I'm going to talk about. This. So I'll tell you what this Q analog is, and I'll tell you what this result on the basic result in linear algebraic graph theories. So I'd start with a few things which I call as tree independent theorems on trees. So this is a famous result of Graham and Pollock. Yeah, it goes back to 1971. 1971 is 50 years ago. Yeah, half a century ago. Yeah, this they proved it. So so they gave this very nice result that if you look at any tree on n vertices and look at the distance matrix. So distance matrices, you have the rows and the columns are indexed by vertices. The ijth entry, the entry in row I, column j. So I and j are vertices. So the entry corresponding to row vertex I and column vertex j is the distance between vertex I and j in the tree. Because the tree is connected, all distances are finite. You won't have entries which are infinite. If the graph is not connected, there will be infinite entries. That's a problem. Yeah. Whereas here, since the distance tree is connected, so the distance matrix will have only finite entries. That's the interesting thing. So then what this says, this result of Graham and Pollock says is that the determinant of the distance matrix is given by this nice formula. So you can ignore what the formula is. We can derive it, by Graham, Hoffman, Hosoya, we can derive a better version. As in, this formula is not the, some function of n. Yeah. So what it says is this determinant of the distance matrix is independent of the tree structure. No matter what tree you take on n vertices, you're only going to get this number as the determinant of the distance matrix. So in general, people are trying, you can view this in two ways. That is either as good news or as bad news. So the good news is, you have something which is independent of the tree. The bad news is if you want to, separate trees. So in general, when there are two trees, you try to say, in what way is this first tree different from the second tree? So you can say, maybe you look at the number of leaves that the first tree has, it's different from the number of leaves that the second tree has, or you look at the length of the longest path, many things, look at eigenvalues of the adjacency matrix. Does it have a perfect matching? So not all trees have perfect matches. Yeah, there's a theorem which says that a tree has a perfect matching if and only if the adjacency matrix is non-singular. So there are many interesting results here which can differentiate between trees. So this result is bad news. If you want to distinguish between trees, don't use this result, because this says you cannot distinguish between trees. All trees on n vertices have the same determinant for the distance matrix. So that's the point here. The distance matrix has the same determinant value for all trees which have the same number of vertices. So the only thing that is common is the number of vertices. So if you fix the number of vertices, so there's a theorem of Cayley which says that there are n to the n minus 2 labeled trees. So all the n to the n power n minus 2 labeled trees have the same determinant for the distance matrix. Yeah, that's the point. That's what this result says. This is Graham and Pollock theorem. Yeah. All right. So here is an example. Here we have two trees. So clearly the two trees are not isomorphic, because you can say, let's say the length of the longest path is different. There is this vertex with degree 1, yeah, with this vertex 1 with degree 3 in the left, the tree on the left. There is no vertex with degree 3 in the tree on the right. So you can check that the trees are not isomorphic. That's an easy thing. And if you look at the respective distance matrices, see, this is a star. No, the first tree is a star. I'll go back and forth a little because it's good to look at the tree and then the distance matrix so that we understand what this is. So the first tree, there is a vertex 1, which is at the center. So everything is at distance 1 from the vertex 1, every other vertex. And all the other vertices are at distance 2 from themselves, from each other. So if you look at this, so is my cursor seen that I'm shaking it? Is this seen?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes,
good,
yes.
good. Thank you. Yeah. So this entry, so the diagonal entries are all 0. Is that clear in any distance matrix? Because the diagonal entry will be the distance from the vertex to itself, and that is always 0. Yeah. So if you look at vertex 1 to 2, why is this entry 1? Because vertex 1 to 2, there is only a vertex 1 to 2, there is a path of length 1. Is it clear? Vertex 1 to 3, there is a path of length 1. Vertex 1 to 4, there is a path of length 1. So if you look at it, vertex 1 to 3 is path of length 1, length 1, length 1, likewise. So this distance matrix will be symmetric because the graph is undirected. So if you have a path from I to j, you have a path from j to I as well, you know. So it's a symmetric matrix, this distance matrix. And if you look at the other entries, all diagonals are 0. If you look at distance from 2 to 3, it will be 2. The distance from 2 to 3 is 2. Distance from 2 to 4 is 2. Distance from 3 to 4 is 2. Is it clear? So you get this matrix for the tree, which is, you know, the first tree on the left. If you look at the, so is this distance matrix clear? Then I'll go on to the next tree. Yeah. Is it okay? Any questions?
No question. It's
Okay,
clear.
yeah.
Thank you.
So if you look at the second tree here, so this vertex 1 is at distance 1 from 2, 0 from itself, 1 from vertex 2, 2 from vertex 3, and 3 from vertex 4. So you get this distance 1, 0 from itself, 1 from vertex 2, 2 from vertex 3, 3 from vertex 4, the distance. So by symmetricity, the first column is also determined once we know the first row. And the others, you know, you can check. Vertex 2, the distance 1 from vertex 1, 0 to itself, 1 to vertex 3, and 2 to vertex 4. Yeah, this you can check. Vertex 2, 1 at distance 1 to vertex 1, 0 to itself, distance 1 to vertex 3, and distance 2 to vertex 4. You know, so you will get this, and you can check that both have determinant value -12. If you can just run it on Sage or whatever, you know, you want to compute it by hand also, it's fine. Yeah. So this was a remarkable result that was proven, you know, 50 years ago as we speak. So 50 years ago, Graham and Pollock proved that this determinant of the distance matrix of a tree is some function of just n, the number of vertices in the tree, not dependent on any other parameter of the tree, just the number of vertices. That's all. That's the only thing that matters. All right. Then later, this Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya, they showed a more general result, yeah, from which the Graham-Pollock theorem also follows. So they gave a more general result about the distance matrix of any connected graph. Yeah. So let G be a connected graph with two connected blocks, G1, G2 to Gr. So what do I mean by two connected blocks? So a two connected block is a maximal two connected subgraph. So when I say two connected subgraph, there are at least two paths between any two vertices in that block. So these, if you look at a graph like this, so what is drawn in the dotted thing, no? They are all the blocks. See, whenever you have a cut point, no, cut point meaning if I remove some vertex and then the graph will disconnect, the number of connected components will increase. If that happens, that such a cut point cannot be in a two connected block. So these are some graph theory I'm assuming. If there are any questions, you let me know. So what I want to say is, you know, this vertex 3 is special because if you delete vertex 3, no, so this edge 2, 3, edge 3, 4, and edge 3, 5 will also get deleted because one of their endpoints is no longer there. Then the number of components that the graph has will increase. Earlier the graph is connected, then it will become disconnected. Similarly, vertex 5, if you delete, then this graph will become disconnected after deletion. Whereas if you delete vertex 6, the graph is not going to be disconnected. The graph will still be connected. All right. If you delete vertex 7, the graph will still be connected. Yeah. So this is this. If you look at the graph, if you look at maximal two connected subgraphs, that is what is called as a block. So this word block, no. So I've tried to highlight it. Is it okay? Is it coming? This block. So the word block means it's a maximal two connected, maximal with respect to set inclusion, two connected subgraph. Yeah. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, this set of vertices, it's two connected because if you look at just the graph induced on these four vertices, there are at least two paths between any two pair of vertices, any pair of vertices, distinct pair. Yeah. If you take 1 and 1 itself, there is no need. You can say it's infinitely many connected. But if you look at 1 and 2, there are at least two disjoint paths. So like that. Yeah. So this in general, we have this notion of block blocks of a graph. That's a standard concept in graph theory. And what this Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya did would involve to find out the distance matrix of a connected graph. They'll try to find relate it to the distance matrix of the two connected blocks of the graph. All right. So if you have the distance if you have a graph G, now the graph is all I require is the graph be connected so that the distance matrix has finite entries. Then you look at the distance matrix DG, yeah, of a graph G, yeah, and you come up with this new notion, sum of cofactors sum of DG. So this is the sum of the cofactors of this distance matrix. So cofactors, it's clear because it comes in your standard linear algebra in this, when you try to invert matrices, the cofactor matrix will come, yeah, in your when you try to invert matrices, you can actually show that the cofactor matrix is one of the ingredients in the inverse. So if when I say cofactor sum, you look at the cofactor matrix and you sum all the entries in the cofactor matrix. Is that clear? So this is the cofactor sum. So suddenly that parameter is going to become relevant for us. Yeah. So this is the result. So this was proved 6 years later, 1977. So let G be a graph with two connected blocks, G1, G2 to GR. So these two blocks, G1 to GR, they are more than connected. So of course, G itself is a connected graph. The two connected blocks are this G1, G2 to GR. So each of these graphs, the blocks are themselves two connected. So they're more than connected. Yeah. So then this sum of the cofactors in DG, that is actually equal to product of the sum of the cofactors in each of the DGI. Yeah. And then if this determinant of DG is here, you get sum over DG. But so I'll tell you one way, another easier way to look at the second thing, but that assumes that the sum of the cofactors is non-zero. So you divide the second term. Let's look at the second equation. You divide it by this cofactor sum of DG on both the left and the right hand sides. So you get determinant of DG by cofactor sum of DG is equal to determinant of DGI by cofactor sum of DGI, sigma over I equal to 1 to R. So is it clear? I'm just trying to divide by the cofactor sum of DG on both sides. The second equation, I'm dividing by cofactor sum of DG on both sides. And I'm using the first thing. Cofactor sum of DG is product of the cofactor sums of the individual two connected blocks. So here you get everything except J equal to I here in this term. So you get determinant of DG by cofactor sum of DG equal to sigma I equal to 1 to R, determinant of DGI by cofactor sum of DGI. Yeah, that's what you get. So this determinant by cofactor sum, that ratio is additive across blocks. So here the reason why we don't do it is sometimes the sum of the cofactors will be 0. In which case this second condition is better. The second form of writing it is better. You don't want to divide by something 0. All right. So is this clear? This, and if you look at any tree, on n vertices, as we had this edge, this 3, 5 is a block. So any edge is a block by itself. You can check because there is no way you can get a two connected subgraph. The tree is just barely connected. So in fact, if you look at connectivity of a tree, it's a minimally connected graph. That is, if you delete anything, any edge, any vertex, anything, you will lose connectivity. Yeah? Trees are minimally connected. So what this says is every edge is a block in a tree, and there are n-1 such edges. Yeah. So if you look at any edge, so any edge has only two endpoints, x and y. So what is the distance? If you look at just that 2x2 matrix, the distance matrix of this block will just have 0, 1, 1, 0. Will just be this. Is this clear? So it essentially means you're trying to decompose the tree into blocks, and every edge of a tree on n vertices. So a tree on n vertices has n-1 edges. That also is a standard result which is taught in any graph theory course, the first course in graph theory. So every edge is a two connected block. So there are n-1 blocks. Each block has the determinant, the distance matrix to be 0, 1, 1, 0. And so determinant of this DGI is -1. Sum of the cofactors is -2. You apply this result, you will get an alternate proof of this theorem of Graham and Pollack, the 1971 result of Graham and Pollack. So that follows from this 1977 result of Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya. This is even more general, more general result than the theorem of Graham and Pollack. So this is also known, well-known result of Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya. So 1977, it's all this is really old. So this is the status of like the background that we are needing. And I'll tell you one more thing about Q and logs. Yeah. So here is an exercise. Yeah.
Professor, I want to.
Yeah.
If graph itself is two connected, it works.
Yeah. If the graph itself is two connected, then you don't need to break it any further. Then you will just, this will not give you anything because it writes it as a function of two connected blocks, no? So the graph itself is, if you take the cycle, for example, that's a two connected.
Yeah.
So then you can't get anything further from this Graham Hoffman also. Yeah. You will only get that. So this is only true for graphs where there are several blocks, where there you will get something for distance matrix, but this formula will not give you anything.
For graph, this formula does not give you any.
This formula does not, no, it will not give you anything because it expresses the determinant of the distance matrix of the graph as a function of the determinant of the distance matrices of the two connected blocks. If the graph itself is two connected as a block by itself, then this decomposition won't give you any much. It's just like, you know, this is the building blocks are, what do you do for building blocks? That's what you're asking. Yeah. In that case, you have to do something separately to try to find out. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Good. Yeah, because there you can't do anything else, because there you need two connected blocks. That is like the atom with which you build more connected graphs. Yeah. All right. So the graph itself is two connected. Yeah, you can't do much. This theorem won't help you much. Yeah.
Is it difficult to find these two connected blocks?
No. There are good algorithms for it, because you have to find cut points. So there is this block cut point. Yeah, there is a cut vertex is, so if there are cut vertices, then if there are no cut vertices, it's two connected by definition. So you just see connectivity can be found out. You know, you using breadth first search, depth first search. Some searches can be used to find out connectivity. Is the graph connected? So you just delete every vertex one at a time and then find out. So you can find out cut vertices. So in particular, you can find out, you know, once you found out cut vertices existence, then it tries to find out what are the two connected. So there are good algorithms for this. So algorithmically, this is easy to do. It's not, there is nothing hard about this. Yeah. Any questions? Any more? I mean,
sir, here 3 and the vertex 3 and 5 is the articulation vertex.
Correct. Yeah. Cut vertex is also called articulation vertex. Yes. So if you delete them, the number of connected components will increase. So the graph is connected as it is. If you delete vertex 3, this 1, 2, and 4 will become a component by itself. They will be separated from the remaining portion. If you delete 5, there will be more. 5, 6, and 7 will be a component. 8 and 9 will be a component. 1, 2, 3, 4 will be a component.
So why it is two connected? I didn't get what is two connected.
No, two connected meaning it's there are at least two different paths, two vertex disjoint paths. That's the idea of a two connected. So that means in particular a cut vertex cannot be in a two connected block. So if you omit two connected blocks, what do you get? That will. So this decomposition of a graph into its blocks, that's reasonably straightforward. So it can be done. 1 minute. It just says that some 19% battery is there. So let me just put it onto a charger so that I don't worry about this. Just 1 minute. All right.
Two connected means I think two vertices are needed to disconnect the graph.
Correct. Two, yeah, correct. And maximal, yeah. So it is maximal in that sense that you need, correct. You need, it is maximal with that property that you need two vertices to disconnect that. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now you apply, this is the building block for trees. So we've looked at an alternate proof of this Graham-Pollock result using a more advanced result. That's what we have done. And in general, how do you find the sum of the cofactors? So here are two ways. So in fact, these are both covered in this book called Graphs and Matrices by Bapat. So if you have that book, it is there. These are standard ways, and I've just put them as exercises. Yeah. So let M be a square matrix, and let J be the all ones matrix of the same dimension as M. Then determinant of M plus J is determinant of M plus sum of the cofactors of M. So you can find, sum of the cofactors of this matrix M in this. That's one way. Here is another way. Let A be an n cross n matrix and B be the matrix obtained from A by first subtracting the first row from all other rows, 2 to n. So A is an n cross n matrix. So you look at, so you do row 2 is row 2 minus row 1, row 3 is row 3 minus row 1, etc. Row n is row n minus row 1. That you do, and then you do the same operation for columns. So column 2 is column 2 minus column 1, column 3 is column 3 minus column 1, so on. Yeah, column n is column n minus column 1. You do this. So now you've done some row operations and some column operations. Now you remove the first row and the first column, and then look at the determinant of that. That will be the sum of the cofactors. This is also so both of these are there in Bapat's book, so you can use this. This is the second one is what was done by Graham, Hoffman, and Hosoya. You can check. Yeah, these are just exercises. You can try to solve them. If you have any issues, you let me know. I will be happy to. So it's there in this book by Bapat. Yeah, as I said, Graphs and Matrices. It's a good book. You can use it for a semester course. And it covers a good amount of linear algebraic graph theory. Yeah, there is one chapter on distance matrices where this is all these results are also mentioned, and some more is also mentioned. All right. So there is another interesting result for the inverse of the distance matrix of a tree. For an arbitrary graph, we have a formula, but it doesn't mean that the determinant will be non-zero. But for a tree, you can definitely get the inverse of the distance matrix. So it is actually, if you look at it, there is a column vector. There is this delta V. Delta is a column vector. So if you look at, I describe this Graham and Lowash result. So this L is the Laplacian, minus half L is the Laplacian, and this delta transpose will be a rank 1 matrix because delta is a vector. So if you have a vector times its transpose, it is a rank 1 matrix. So you have a scaled version of the Laplacian plus some scale, perturbed by a rank 1 matrix. That will be the inverse of T. That's what we are saying. So I can send the slides if anybody wants, or somebody wants. You can also take. These days it's easier to take a picture. If you have mobiles, click. That is easier. But I can send you the slides. So D inverse is a rank 1 update of a scalar version of the Laplacian matrix. Yeah, that's what this result of Graham and Lowash says. Yeah. So the famous result. All right. So there are quite a few things known about this distance matrix of trees, DT. Yeah. There are quite a few things known, and it's an interesting area of research. Quite a new properties are being discovered. New generalizations are being found out. This is a good and active area, especially in the Indian system. There are a lot of people who are working on trees and distance matrices. Matrices associated with graphs. That's an area. Laplacian is studied. Distance matrices are studied. Resistance matrices are studied. Quite a few things. Yeah. All right. So here is the idea that we have two.
I haven't told previous slide. That's got the delta power T. Delta is a minimum degree.
Delta T is like transpose. There is no
transpose.
power T. The T maybe it confuses with the tree T itself. Maybe okay.
Delta is a minimum degree,
small t, instead of capital T. Okay, I remember.
Here, thanks. The delta means a smallest
delta
degree.
Delta is a column n cross n. So delta is a column vector. N cross.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Oh. Yeah, delta is a column. Is it getting highlighted? The first line. It seems highlighted for me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the delta is a column vector. So delta times delta transpose will be an n cross n matrix, but it's a rank 1 matrix. Anything xy transpose will be rank 1. So here it's just xx transpose. It's a symmetric version because L is also symmetric and D. So D symmetric, D inverse you can check. For symmetry reasons you get delta transpose. Something like xx transpose. So that follows. All right. Shall I go ahead? Any more questions? All right. So in general, we have this idea of Q analogs. So whenever you have an identity involving numbers, you try to replace these numbers by univariate polynomials, like f of q, g, q. Somehow, this in this area, the variable is called q. It's not called f of x, g of x, so on. Somehow it's called f of q, g of q, etc. And then, maybe by setting this variable q to be alpha, you get the number-based result. Yeah, this is the general idea. So in general, people try to generalize. For example, a polynomial version of this Fermat's last theorem, this is x to the n plus y to the n equal to z to the n. That is false. If you change the x, y, and z to be polynomials, then this Fermat's last theorem is not true. There are these results like that. So in general, when you have number theoretic results or results involving numbers, you try to generalize them to polynomials and then try to see whether some such a thing works. And then when times it works, it doesn't work. We're interested in such, the behavior of something more general. Yeah. So this theorem 1 is this Graham-Pollock's theorem. A Q analog of that is also true. Yeah. This. So if you look at it, what is the Graham-Pollock theorem saying? It says that the determinant of the distance matrix of a tree has some formula, nice formula. So in the distance matrix of a tree, you remember that the diagonals are all 0. Off diagonals are something, the distance, between vertex I and vertex j. Yeah, that will be the ijth entry. So in this distance will be some number, it will be like 1, 2, 5, something. And it's going to be a non-negative integer. So in that, you replace for a non-negative integer I, you consider, or positive integer I, consider the Q analog IQ to be 1 plus Q square plus etc. up to Q to the I minus 1. Yeah. So 0Q is 0, 1Q is 1, 2Q is 1 plus Q, 3Q is 1 plus Q square. Okay. So is it clear? So let me just repeat. We are trying to change the entries of the distance matrix from numbers to some polynomial in the variable Q. And what are we going to do? We're going to do this standard transformation. 0Q is 0, 1Q is 1. There's no change there. 2Q will not be 2, it will be 1 plus Q. Because of this, 1 plus Q square plus up to the Q power I minus 1. Yeah. So what will 3Q be? It will be 1 plus Q square. 4Q will be 1 plus Q square plus Q cube. So on. Yeah. So, of course, if you put Q equal to 1, you get back IQ equal to I, right? If you set Q equal to 1 in this, clearly it will give you, if you set Q equal to 1, you get IQ equal to I. So you get back the original result. If you could prove something here with for the Q analog, then of course you can set Q to be 1 and recover the original result. So if you could get some result here with these changes, it's a more general result than the Graham-Pollock theorem. Yeah. So if you look at the star tree that we had, with vertex 1 being the star, the center of the star. So that was one of the trees that we had. So vertex 1, 2, 3, and 4. There were 4 vertices in general. Vertex 1 was at the center. Everybody else was at, connected to vertex 1. So in that case, we had the 0, 1, 1, 1. That's correct. 0, 1, 1, 1. The first row and first column are the same. Second, and you see this other submatrix on vertices 2 to 4. So the zeros on the diagonal remain zeros on the diagonal because 0Q is 0. All the other entries were 2 and now they have all become 1 plus Q. Is it clear? Because the entry 2 has now changed to 1 plus Q. Is it clear? This is all we are doing. Earlier we had a result about the determinant of the distance matrix of a tree. Now we have what is called as the Q distance matrix of a tree. So in Q distance matrix, you just change the distance between vertex I and vertex j to its Q analog. So you replace the entry dij, which is a positive integer, by this polynomial IQ. Why is it not highlighting full? I wanted to highlight the full line. Yeah, this IQ is 1 plus Q square plus Q to the I minus 1. So you change just the entry I gets changed to this polynomial, and they're all polynomials in one variable. Somehow the variable is called Q. It's a traditional to do it, and it's too late to change it. It's going to be very hard. All right. So if you look at the other matrix, that the path tree that we had, 1, 2, 3, 4, in a line, we had the other tree. So the distance we had, 0, 1, 2, 3 was the distance. So 0 will be 0, 1 will be 1. The first row I'm saying. 2 will be 1 plus Q, 3 will be 1 plus Q squared. Yeah, and so that will be the same first column. Second row will be second vertex had 1 here, 2 itself, 3 and 4. So one distance was 1, 0, 1, 2. So that becomes 1, 0, 1, 1 plus Q. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. So now you look at this. So you have the following Q analogs of the distance matrix. And this is a theorem of Bapat, Lal and Pati from 2006. So that was 1971. So 35 years later, this was proved by Bapat and 2 of his students, Lal and Pati. Yeah. So if QD is the Q analog of the distance matrix, then determinant of QD is -1 to the n minus 1, n minus 1, 1 plus Q to the n minus 2. So 1 plus Q I write as 2Q. So this n minus 1 doesn't get a Q analog. It's 2Q that has a Q analog. And that's what we have. Yeah. So this So is it clear? If you put q equal to 1, all the entries will become their distance analog, the classical distance analog, and then you will get 2q. When you put q equal to 1 and 2q, you will just get 2 power n minus 2. So you recover the Graham-Pollock theorem when q equal to 1. But the advantage, you can set to be arbitrary q. So suppose you set it to be q equal to 2, then you get something minus 1 to the n minus 1, n minus 1, 3q. It will be 3 power n. There is nothing. You don't have a choice. Distance is distance. Here, you can, instead of, you change the distance I to some other function, 1 plus q squared. So you can change it to whatever you want. If you put q equal to 1, you get something. You put q equal to 2, it will become 1 plus 2 squared plus etc. You change the distance slightly. So you're changing distances slightly, but according to a pre-specified formula. And in that case, what is the distance matrix? That also is tree independent. See? So something more general than what we actually knew is indeed true because of this result of Bapat, Lal and Pati. 2006 they proved this. So is this clear? If you change q equal to 2, what will happen? So your distance will become, here the distance will become, instead of put q equal to 2, all distances 2 will become distance 3. Distance 3 will become 7 now. It's like that. Is it clear? If you put q equal to 2, distances are now scaled differently. Distance 1 will be 1, distance 2 will be 3, distance 3 will be 7. Essentially 2 power n minus 1. So it becomes q to the n minus 1 by q minus 1. Essentially, this 1 plus q, this 1 plus q square plus to the q to the I, is 1 q to the I minus 1 by q minus 1. This. So you can change it to, you see, you can play around with distances. See, who said distance 1 is distance 1, distance 2 is 2. So distance 1 is 1, distance 2 is 3, distance 3 is 7. You change it slightly. You can still get a good formula for the distance matrix as long as the underlying graph is a tree. That's the point. Okay. So that's what this Bapat, Lal and Pati showed. I mean, is this okay? Is this what I'm saying? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So can these distances be interpreted as weighted distances?
Yeah, you can put, the Bapat, Lal and Pati have a weight for every edge. You can put,
fixed weight, right?
No, W1, W2, etc. Yeah.
Okay.
There are weights on every edge. So the weight, if you look at the path, then the sum of the weights, so it will be W1 plus W2 plus W3. Any W.
Here, weights are functions of that entry.
Of the edge. No, there is an edge. Every edge has a weight, which is like the time you take to traverse that, maybe. Yeah. So then if you want to go from some vertex to another vertex, and suppose there are 3 edges on the path, so it will be weight of the first edge plus weight of the second edge plus weight of the third edge. That will be, that also you have now variants are known. So that is one example that is known. Now you can put matrices as weights. So in fact, that means you will not commute. You can put matrices as weights and you can take the product of the matrices. That also, much more is now known. In which case the thing will be, it will not be symmetric. But then you can still do, and you can put, maybe you put distance q when you go from in one direction, t if you go in the other direction. You can break the symmetry. Symmetry can be broken in several ways. So the path exists, but it's not the same. Going from I to j is not the same as going from j to I. So you put variable q when you go in one direction, variable t when you go in the other direction. That also, you can do. Much more is known. So a lot of these variants are known. You can put q power dij. The exponential distance matrix. That results are known. Much, a lot of them is known. So quite a few variants are known. Yeah.
So again, it's a question of variance. There's something special about 1 plus q squared plus q to the d.
Yeah.
And that polynomial.
Yeah.
That polynomial can change itself, or
no, for this polynomial we know good results. I'm trying to get other polynomials. In fact, what is the space of polynomials where you can do this? That's a very good question. I don't know.
Achha. Okay.
Yeah. It's a very good question. Yeah.
So there's another polynomial, which does this?
No, I don't know any other. Yeah, all are variants. I tried even changing it to a bivariate version where you put, t power I plus q power, so you multiply with this with t power I minus 1, t power I minus 2 all the way up to 1. And you take their, product. So it's like t power I minus 1 plus t power I minus 2q plus q squared t power I minus 3, etc. all the way. That doesn't work. So what works? I'll tell you, I have a big list of things which don't work, but that's like Terry Tao saying, you can look at my failure rate. So that's, and it's not of interest. It's like saying here bad news, here bad news, here bad news. No, I think the world doesn't care about bad news. We want, here is a good result. That is of interest. So I can give you a long list of failures that I have, which I've tried, but I don't know any other thing. With weights, you mix the weights with q, then also you can get. So you traverse q times this w1 plus q square times the w1 plus w2 plus q cube times w1 plus w2 plus w3. That also you can do. Those things are known, but essentially there are some variant of this taking this 1 plus q square and some weights. That's all. That's the only thing. Some combination of these will work. Otherwise, yeah, we don't know. At least I don't know. Yeah. So if anybody is interested, definitely you can try. Try several other polynomials. You can just try. It's so easy, and you have Sage. Sage is free. It works on Linux. It works on Apple. It works on Windows. Everything. You name the platform, it works. The only thing I don't know it works on is Android. If it works on your mobile, that's even better. Android and iOS, the Apple thing. If it were to work on that, it will be very good. That I'm not sure because I have not seen. But other three, the laptops, or your desktop, definitely it works. And it takes some 800 MB, but that's nothing. These days, 1 GB of disk space is nothing. The disk space is all 1 TB. We've gone 1 GB, that range. We've gone way ahead of the GB range. So, all right. So does it answer that question? I mean, that I don't know any other result of where you can put any other
polynomial. So I mean, there should be others, is what one would be.
Yeah, definitely. It should be. There should be a good space of polynomials. Everything should be there. Yeah, we should be able to get something. So, and so they proved, Bapat, Lal, and Pati also proved, this inverse. They found out a variant of this delta q. So it's again a rank 1 matrix of this, and there's a q analog of the Laplacian. That's well studied in some number theory as well. Some Ihara-Selberg zeta function is associated to graphs. If you restrict it to trees, you get the q analog of the tree. And much more is known here. Yeah. Thank you. So this.
Just repeat that what you said about the zeta function.
There is this Ihara-Selberg zeta function associated to graphs.
That's what I'll talk about at the
determinant
end.
of a Laplacian, the q Laplacian, and you have to scale it by some 1 by 1 minus q squared power something, m minus n. So it's a scaled version. If you look at the Ihara-Selberg zeta function of a graph, that is actually the determinant of the q Laplacian, a scaled version of the q determinant of the q Laplacian. So this q Laplacian is a matrix that has come in this number theoretic context as well, and somehow it turns out to be what is involved in the inverse of this q distance matrix. So it's again, if you look at this thing, earlier it used to be minus half times L plus the same, the scale factor is the same. This delta, there used to be a vector which is a u transpose. Here you have a q version of that vector. That is because the entries are themselves q. So this is again a rank 1 perturbation of some scaled version of the q analog of the Laplacian, not the Laplacian. And the q analog of the Laplacian has found mention in it other contexts like the Ihara-Selberg zeta function. There's another Bartholdi zeta function where also this q analog of the Laplacian comes. So that zeta function of graphs, that's another interesting topic. I'm not talking about it today, or I have not planned, but we'll see.
I will be talking about it at the end.
Oh, good. Very good. Yeah. Very good. So when I first studied all this, then I thought, see, this Graham and Pollack had a q analog of, had a distance matrix of a tree result on that. Then this Graham, Hoffman, Osoya generalized it for arbitrary graphs. There's a q analog of the Graham-Pollack theorem, but there seems to be no q analog of the Graham, Hoffman, Osoya. I searched around and I couldn't find any q analog. But I had a feeling that if there is a q analog for the Graham-Pollack theorem, there should be a q analog for the Graham, Hoffman, Osoya also. There should be. There is no way that there cannot be a q analog for arbitrary graphs. There's nothing. So I was thinking about it. I tried to get. So here is where Sage helped me. So I tried, this if the distance matrix of each. So if you try, each block is a triangle instead of a block, instead of just an edge. If you try each block is a triangle, a clique of size 3, not a clique of size 2, then you could get that this QDG, because you have a clique, you have only zeros and ones. The distance, and 0q is 0, 1q is 1. So there's no change. So there you can try to do something. So I was trying to get determinant is 3, cofactor sum, all that. I was trying to. I couldn't get what is the correct statement I wanted to. So if you look at the Graham, Hoffman, Hosoya, there is this notion of cofactor sum and determinant. So determinant is straightforward. There is no q determinant. So there is, as of now, there are some versions of q determinant due to Kapranov and all, but we are not interested in that. We just say look at the determinant. So determinant is same. So I need to get some variant of this cofactor sum. That's all I have to do. Yeah. But how do you get, what is the statement? I had no idea. So I had to try to get a Q analog of this result. So determine the second statement, this determinant of DG, that is known. This cofactor sum is what is the hard part. Yeah. So how do you define cofactor sum for matrices where there are Qs? Every entry is actually a polynomial. The ijth entry is a polynomial in the variable Q. Yeah. So how do you define cofactor sum in this case? Q cofactor sum. So I have to do something. So I was trying to muck around with examples. I could get something, and then it's Q analog. So by the Graham-Hoffman's Hosoya theorem, if you take T is a tree with R blocks, each block is a, see, if you take each block is a triangle, and you connect them up in any arbitrary manner, then that also is well studied, because there it's by the Graham-Hoffman Hosoya theorem, you have R such blocks, then however you connect the blocks, you will get the same determinant for the distance matrix. So the determinant of the distance matrix by the Graham-Hoffman Hosoya theorem will be 2R times 3 to the R minus 1. Here I'm having R copies of the triangle. Yeah. So T is a tree with R blocks of K3s. Yeah. R. So R triangles I have.
Professor?
Yeah.
I couldn't get a what is a T be a tree with R blocks of K3.
By tree, see, tree, I should say, you're connecting up these triangles. You have R triangles. Okay. And you connect them up such that they
looks like a star.
Yeah, you can either star or put them in one line. Suppose you have 3 triangles. You put all the triangles with one vertex in common. That is one way.
Okay.
You put one triangle, another triangle, another triangle. So that's putting it in slightly in a path along manner, path kind of manner. They're all put linear.
Okay.
That kind of.
What the T means that you mean it.
Correct. That graph that you obtain by putting this either this. So let's say we had three triangles, and I had one triangle, another triangle, another triangle. So I have them one point in common. That is one way.
Okay.
And then I have 3 triangles in a line connected at one. So there are 2 points that are connected.
Oh, here
so both
T
of them
means
have the same.
Here T means the graph.
Yeah, that graph. Yeah. So maybe I should say 3 here.
In a classical tree, simply replace vertices by these triangles.
Correct. This triangles. Yeah. Correct. So maybe I could have used some other word than tree. Maybe that causes confusion. Yeah. Okay. I'll remember this. Thanks. Yeah. So by this Graham-Hoffman Hosoya theorem, the determinant of this distance matrix is independent of how you connect the blocks. That's what it says. Because if you look at the Graham-Hoffman Hosoya, it says determinant by cofactor sum is sum of the determinant by cofactor sum for each of the blocks. Now the blocks are same. There are R of them. So then the manner in which you connect it is irrelevant. That's what this result says. Graham-Hoffman Hosoya result. So then I thought, so there is this 2R 3 power R minus 1. I thought I will get 2R, instead of 3, I'll get the Q analog of 3, because you get Q analog of 2 there. And if you look at this Graham, this note, so Q analog of 2 you get here in the Bapat-Lalpati theorem. So I thought, if you try something else, you get the Q analog of 3, maybe, And then, but using Sage, I got that, this 2R is correct. But instead of getting 1 plus Q squared to the R minus, I get 1 plus 2Q power R minus. So I couldn't figure out, what is happening. So I had to do a lot of experimentation at that time. And, the good thing is, I had a lot of data, case for, I like that phase of work also, when a lot of data is accumulated, and then slowly you see some pattern evolving, and then, that for that phase, there is somehow I don't have any, some idea strikes you, there is nothing, you just keep trying out. There is no guiding principle there, just looking at patterns. How do you detect a pattern? That there is, I don't know what to say. That's just some intuition, some gut feeling, that's it. So I defined this modified definition of Q cofactor sum as follows. So if you look at this cofactor matrix, that I'll call as the CUV. Cofactor matrix. So you look at the sum of the row sum. You look at the row sum of the cofactor matrix. Then you define Q power D. So cofactor sum with respect to a vertex W to be Q power dVW row sum of V. So let me tell you what I'm doing. So you look at the cofactor matrix. Sum of the cofactor matrix will be the cofactor sum. Now we have the Q distance matrix. So you get the Q cofactor sum matrix. So this Q cofactor G is equal to CUV. This is the cofactor. Q analog of the distance matrix you take, you look at the cofactors. That will give you some matrix, the matrix of cofactors. Now, instead of taking sum of everything, you just do row sum firstly. You do row sum, you multiply it by some q power something. That's what I'm doing. And now because q, if you set it to be 1, you will get sigma to, you will get, you know, some row sum actually. Row, if you set q equal to 1, q power something, no, it will be 1 power something, even 1 power 0 is 1. So it will be something into some of the row sums, which will be row sum will give you cofactors. So this is a generalization of, I wanted to get a generalization of the cofactor sum. So you take the cofactor matrix, you look at the row sums, if you look at the first row sum multiplied by q power distance between v and w. So this q cofactor sum depends on the w, vertex w that you are starting out with. So with respect to a vertex w, what am I defining? So let's say the first row sum is R1, second row sum is R2, etc. Last row sum is R1. I have a vertex W. With respect to which I'm defining it, the q cofactor sum with respect to W is q power distance between W and 1 times row sum 1. Distance q power distance of W and 2. That is going to be q power something, no? So q power something times the row sum for the second row. So on. This is what I'm doing. So this is like a weighted row sum. Instead of getting a sum of cofactors, you're doing row sum and then you're weighting it by some q power distance. And this is what we're doing. So this, how did I come up with? Just, you know, by looking at examples, toying around with this. So here, but is it clear? Instead of looking at sum of all the entries in the matrix, I'm saying row sum multiplied by q power something. Second row sum multiplied by q power something. Third row sum multiplied by q power something. What is that q power something? So q power, first row sum multiplied by q power distance between 1 and w multiplied by first row sum. Distance between q and w, q power distance between 2 and w multiplied by second row sum. Distance between q and q power distance between 3 and w multiplied by third row sum. That's what you do here. Is this clear? Row sum v multiplied by q power distance between v and w, sum over all v. So now this trouble is, this depends on the w, no? The definition seems to depend on w, whereas the cofactor sum is not dependent on w. Some of the cofactors has nothing to do with any vertex, just some of the cofactors, no? So I need to prove something, yeah? So when q equal to 1, definitely you will get this q cofactor sum wg equal to cofactor sum of tg. Is this clear? When q equal to 1, because this q power something will be 1. This is 1 power something into row sum. And there you have set all the q's to be 1. So this equation, this equality, this, no, it's not the whole line. Yeah, this equality will come. But what about arbitrary q? Yeah. So the troublesome point was this definition, this q cofactor sum of wg depends on this column vertex w. Yeah. So I experimented with Sage, and it showed me, you know, miraculously that no matter what vertices u1 and u2 you take, the q cofactor sum with respect to u1 is equal to the q cofactor sum with respect to u2. Yeah. So that was a kind of surprise for me. I did not expect it actually. No, I did not expect it. So, and then, you know, eventually I proved, you know, there was a lemma. This is the first lemma that if you take vertices u1 and u2, if they're same, there is nothing to prove. If they are distinct, u1 not equal to u2, then the q cofactor sum with respect to u1 is equal to the q cofactor sum with respect to u2. Yeah. So this is the first result that I. So when as soon as I got this result, so let me just state the q cofactor sum definition again. Is it clear? You have the cofactor matrix. You like look at the row sum, multiply the first row sum by q power distance between w and 1. Second row sum multiplied by q power distance between w and 2. And then you add all of these factors, this chunk. So you just take a slab multiplied by something, add it to a second slab multiplied by something. So now you do this, and then somehow it the lemma says that what you get, no, is independent of this vertex u1 and u2. It's very so that is the first indication for me that, you know, oh, I'm on the right track. Yeah. So if this is correct, so this q cofactor sum with respect to v, no, is independent of the vertex v. And so what is it with this? So it is independent of the vertex v or u, and it turns out to be this q minus 1 into determinant of the q1 log of the distance matrix plus cofactor sum of this. So this is what I had to do, q cofactor sum. Yeah. So here cofactor sum of q dg is some of the cofactor sums of the q distance matrix, but you have to multiply it, you have to add some extra term, q minus 1 times determinant of this. So essentially when q equal to 1, no, this will become, this term will become 0. That's what. So this is what I had to do. Yeah, this is I proved long back. And then with respect to this, you know, exact analog of the Graham-Hoffman-Hosoya theorem. Exact, you know, q cofactor sum is product of q cofactor sums of the individual blocks. That follows, and this determines the same form, exactly the same thing. no change at all. Yeah. So you get so this was the so I had just solved this problem, and I was writing it up in LaTeX and all that. I had written up a very preliminary draft, and actually Professor Bapat was visiting IIT Bombay at that time, and he gave a talk on similar things. Yeah. And then after the talk, I went and told him that this Q analog of Graham Hoffman Hosoya, I'm interested. He said, yeah, I'm also interested. I had tried about it. I was thinking about it. We tried, but we couldn't define this Q cofactor sum. It's not a straightforward definition. I don't know. So I told him, I think I have one. So he said, oh, have you had? So he was having tea. I was also having tea. So we kind of finished quickly. Then he said, let's go. I'm interested in knowing what you've done. So I showed him and I gave him this. So he said, no, let me think for a while. And he just paced up and down in my office. And then he said, I think it's correct. Yeah. So very good. That's a good definition. Then he told, why don't you come to ISI? So that is the first time I visited ISI. He had come in December, and then he told me, you come. So I went and visited him in February. And during this mid-semester week, there is no class. So we can manage. Yeah. So that's how I started working with, because he told me that he had been thinking about this, and he said he had some results, but nothing as concrete as this. So I had the whole thing, but I had not written it up. So anyway, I wrote it up and then sent it to a journal. He said, anyway, that's correct and all. Let's start working on other things. So that's how we started our collaboration. By this paper was the foundation for our collaboration. Yeah, which is I've written several papers with Professor Bapat after that. Yeah. All right. So this is it clear? So in this, if had Sage not been there with me, there is no way I would have done, because you want to do determinant of some matrix with even 5 by 5 matrix with polynomial entries. Very tough actually. It's not straightforward. For determinant, all you need is the matrix B over a commutative ring. That's all you require, and polynomials over one variable. It's a commutative ring. So polynomial ring itself is commutative. So you can get something interesting, but it's very tough to find out the determinant of something. Over. So if anybody wants some Sage code, I can share. I have not done anything here. If anybody wants to get started with Sage, I can maybe send you some Sage code. Well, I have some code. And say the good thing about the Sage is you have something called notebook. So you can open a new notebook, give it a title, distance matrix. That's the title. And then you try whatever you want. So all those commands you've typed are all there for you to later. It's not as if you're typing some Unix command on a terminal, and then later when you log out, those things are gone. It's not like that. You have a notebook feature, which I strongly recommend people to use, because you name the notebook by the topic that you're trying to explore. And then you have a list of commands that you've typed and it works. So that you have with you as a starting point. Later you can modify it. You can try to add more to it. You can go back to that book, modify it, and then save. And then if you want to do something else, use another notebook. You open the notebook and then name and open a new notebook, give it a new name, and then start exploring that. And Sage knows a lot of combinatorics. For example, linear algebra, combinatorics, graph theory, and all, it knows very, very well. There is no it's really good. So because it knows a lot of higher math, it's very easy. So much more is known. Actually, the Smith normal form of a matrix, the distance matrix of a tree, the Smith normal form is independent of the tree. It only depends on the number n of the number of vertices. So quite a few such results we know. Yeah, exponential distance matrix. Q power dij you put, that also is easy. The determinant is independent of the tree. So many results are known. Resistance matrix. Resistance is so in classical distance, so what you do is you try to change the distance to so there is this idea in electrical circuits that you have things in parallel. If you have a series of resistors, if you have resistors in series, their resistance will add up. If you have them in parallel, 1 by effective resistance will be 1 by R1 plus 1 by R. So you can do some effective resistance computation that somehow goes via the Laplacian. And because of the going via the Laplacian, you can define resistance distance. The resistance distance is actually a metric. Distance is a metric, is easy. Resistance distance is also a metric, and that matrix has some interesting properties. So many things are known about this trees and distance matrices and all that. Okay. So now, if you set q equal to 1, you will recover the earlier theorems. So this is like more general version of this. So now after this, the good thing is you can get a few interesting corollaries. So what if you set q equal to -1? So here you can set q to anything you want. Now once you have a result with q, and then of course if you set q equal to 1, every distance, the distance d, the dq will become d itself. But what about q equal to -1? So it's clear that if you look at the definition of q, the q distance, no, 1 plus q square plus all the way to q to the I minus 1. Here. So if q equal to, if you set q equal to minus 1, so either it will be it's starting with 1 and always 1 minus 1 1 minus 1. So depending on parity, either it will be 0 or it will be 1. Is it clear? Q distance, yeah, because it's like 1 minus 1 plus, yeah. All right. Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. So for odd I, IQ is 1, and for even I, IQ is 0 when we set q equal to minus 1. Is this okay? Just straightforward, yeah. So in this case, what will happen? So I have the q distance matrix, and now I'm going to set q equal to minus 1 in the q distance matrix. So this, what am I doing? In each entry of the distance matrix, you replace it by its mod 2 value. Even meaning it's 0, odd meaning it's 1. So you replace the distance by its mod 2 value, and then of course you get, G and HB graphs with an identical number of isomorphic blocks. They may differ in the tree structure of the connection among these blocks. So DG prime and DH prime are the mod 2 distance matrices. Then the determinant values are the same. Of course, we can get some other, I don't know what you get by cofactor sum. You put q equal to minus 1. That it's hard to effectively pin down what it is. But here is a statement. You take two, like say even that for trees, you take the mod 2 distance. Their distance matrix is the distance matrix with mod 2 entries. They have the same determinant. This was not known before. This is now known. All these things are now known. That is because I'm setting q equal to minus 1, even in arbitrary graphs. So in particular for trees also. Is it clear? You can pull out such consequences, because if you put q equal to minus 1, IQ at q equal to minus 1 will be 1 if I is odd and 0 if I is even. Yeah. So thus it is equivalent to changing every entry by its mod 2 value. And then now you can get something. So it says that the determinants are the same. Yeah. Determinant of DG bar equal to determinant of DH prime. So DG prime is the mod 2 distance matrix of G. DH prime is the mod 2 distance matrix of H. Only thing I say about G and H is that they have the same number of isomorphic blocks. How the blocks are connected is actually irrelevant, because that's the beauty of this Graham-Hoffman-Hosoya line of thought. How the blocks are connected is actually irrelevant. As long as you have the same number of blocks of the same type, then how you connect, however you connect them up, distance matrix will have the same determinants, cofactor sum, and all that. Yeah. So that is straightforward. So that's what you get here. So is this okay? So there are some. So if you look at mod 2 distance matrix, this is a question that I've been thinking for a long time. I still don't have. It's more than a decade now, and I've given it to all my PhD students. I've produced 3 after that. All of them have said no, it's very tough. So it seems to be not straightforward. See, this mod 2 distance matrix has 0, 1 entries, because it's a mod 2. If you look at distances mod 2, there are only 0 and 1s in the entries. So this corollary 8, which is the previous corollary. So it gives the families of some. So there is, if you have a 0, 1 matrix and it's symmetric, that means it's the adjacency matrix of some graph. Yeah. So there are a few graphs whose adjacency matrices have the same determinant. That's what we get. What can you say about the graphs? So the way to construct the graphs is, you look at the distance, you come up with number of isomorphic blocks are same, you connect them up however differently, then you look at mod 2 distance, and then look at that graph that you form in that manner. It's a complicated description of the graph that you're obtaining, whose adjacency matrix you are saying have the same determinant. Is there an easy description? I still don't know what it is. So here corollary 8 gives us families of graphs whose adjacency matrices have the same determinant. Yeah, adjacency matrix. Yeah, I'm saying. So is some structure or some description of even some subset of the graphs which arise in this mod 2 manner? Is there some description for this set of graphs that arise in this mod 2 manner? At least, not the whole, some subset also, something can we say? I still don't know a good answer for this. A good question. I mean, I've been thinking on it for a while now. I don't know what this is. Yeah. So this is a question here. Yeah, and there are some similar results. So if you have, M and N are matrices with the same determinant. So if you replace all entries of M and N by twice its value, of course you will get the same, because it will just be multiplied essentially by 2 power n times. If you have, you're scaling up every row by 2, you will, 2 will come out of that every row. So you'll get 2, and they have this n cross, both are n cross n matrices. Both are n cross n matrices. So it will be 2 power n times determinant of M, 2 power n times determinant of n, if you scale up everything. So here, now I'm doing something slightly different. replace I in the distance matrix by 2iq. You take 2i and then take the q analog of 2i. So this also gives matrices whose determinants are identical as polynomials, not just as numbers. So here, is it clear what I'm doing? I'm changing entry I to 2i and then changing the 2i to the q analog of 2i, 2iq. So here it's not as if, you know, it's not 2 times iq. That is easy. I'm doing another thing. So instead of I, I'm multiplying it by 2, then looking at the q analog of the 2i. That's what we're doing. Yeah. So then also we get something interesting. Yeah. So in general, you can replace I by kiq and still get some, you know, results. That's the other thing. So so 2qd, if you look at it, this when I told Bapat, he said no, this sounds wrong. And then after a couple of moments, he said no, that's correct. Yeah, what you're saying is correct. So some things, no, it's not straightforward. What the corollaries you can get out, no, is not straightforward. You can so 2qd is the polynomial matrix obtained by replacing all entries I by this. Then you get the determinant of 2qd, 2dq, that is. So every entry I is changed to the q analog of 2 times its I. Now, in general, it's true for q analog of r times also. I'm just writing it for the case when r equal to 2, because you get something, you can write down what it is. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so there are 2 other results. I just mentioned them briefly. I mean, I have time, is it? See, how much time do I have?
You have about 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. 15, then I will definitely finish. Yeah, and I can take some
You
questions.
can talk for 10 minutes and 5 minutes. You can reserve.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. So there is this condensation method to find the determinant. That's another method. Somehow it's not taught in any course that I have seen. You know, I have studied linear algebra when I was a student. I have never read it. Now, when I try to teach it, there is some resistance from the existing, because there is another way to evaluate the determinant. So this is called the condensation rule of this person called Charles Lutwidge Dodson. He has a pen name. He used to be a mathematician, but somehow, you know, this academic circles, they didn't like him. They didn't appreciate what he was doing. So then he just said, no, I'm quitting maths. So he left it. And then he started writing books under this pen name called Lewis Carroll. So people know Lewis Carroll. One of his famous books is called Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. So he's the author. He was actually a mathematician. This author of this Alice in Wonderland, which, you know, is taught. I read it when I was in class 1 or class 2. You know, it's a really small class. I don't remember now. It's so long ago. I don't remember now. And don't hold me accountable to that. But really, you know, when I was really small, I read this thing called Alice in Wonderland. So I'm sure, no, we would have taught our children and all. No, it's a basic book. You know, when they are 8, 9, something like that. You know, when they're that old. So that author is Lewis Carroll, and that's not his original name. His original name is Charles Lutwidge Dodson, and he was a mathematician also. So he has another way to evaluate the determinant. That is called this condensation rule. Yeah, it's a very good rule, very, very straightforward. I mean, there are some. So he tells you it fails sometimes, and he'll tell you when it will fail, and he'll tell you when it will not fail. If it doesn't fail, it's correct. So he has that rule is slightly different, because sometimes he will give you 0 equal to 0. It will say this into this equal to this into this. Sometimes you'll get 0 equal to 0. Then, I mean, it doesn't give you any information. Yeah. So that's the point. So this we get some extra results from this. You know, so this, when I was doing this, I was also trying to see what else I can see. So let G have as blocks R copies of K3. So K3 is the triangle. You have R triangles and you connect them up in any manner you want. Yeah. And let vertex 1 and vertex n belong. So now every triangle is a block, and then I call it as a leaf block if you delete the triangle and, you know, there is no breakage in connectivity, that is, the graph is still remaining a connected graph. So just like we have leaf vertices in the trees whose deletion will not break the graph, you will get a smaller tree on n-1 vertices. So every tree has at least 2 leaves. A leaf is a vertex whose deletion will not break the tree into disconnected components. That is, you won't disconnect the tree. Likewise, you have these leaf blocks, leaf copies of the K. So K3, if there is one copy of K3 which you delete, you still get a connected graph. Those are called as leaf blocks. So let 1 and n be vertices belonging to different leaf blocks. And then if you delete row 1 and Cn, no? So now this is a, see, it's not a symmetric matrix. D is a symmetric matrix. the distance matrix. Now in this I'm deleting row 1 and I'm deleting column n. So I'm not, if you delete the row 1 and column 1, you'll again get a symmetric matrix. You delete row n, column n, you will get a symmetric matrix. Here I'm deleting row 1 and column n. So you get some, some funny matrix that has determinant value, absolute value. So the sign I can tell you, that's it's not important. It will be 3 to the k minus 2. These are so some such. So, and there are a couple of things that I have about the Pfaffian. So Pfaffian, maybe I'll just briefly describe. So this Pfaffian is a so if you take a skew symmetric matrix, so all these results are about symmetric matrices. If you take a skew symmetric matrix, then see, this is well known, that the skew symmetric matrix, all eigenvalues are imaginary. See, if you have a real symmetric matrix, all eigenvalues are real. That follows from the spectral theorem, right? You would have learned it in one version. See, spectral theorem is a body. There will be several versions stated for Hermitian, some complex. They would have. But if you take the case when the matrix is real and symmetric, then if the matrix is real and symmetric, it has real eigenvalues. That's known. That's the standard version. So likewise, if you take a skew symmetric matrix, it has purely imaginary eigenvalues. That is known because these are standard things in linear algebra. So if you take in fact, you would have studied this. If you have a skew symmetric matrix of odd order, then it has determinant 0. So how does it follow? It follows because and I'm saying skew symmetric matrix meaning it's real. Yeah, real matrix which is skew symmetric of odd order, determinant will be 0 because all eigenvalues are purely imaginary and they occur in pairs because the characteristic polynomial is a polynomial with real coefficients. And imaginary roots are imaginary, so they occur in pairs, in conjugate pairs, and they are purely imaginary. So if you have alpha I, you have minus alpha I, so they occur in pairs. Then that will give you 2, 2, 2, 2 such things, maybe repetition, but there'll be the order is odd, so there has to be one thing which is 0. So one of the eigenvalues has to be 0. So such kind of things are known. So if you take a skew symmetric matrix of even order, its determinant will be a perfect square because it will be the eigenvalues will be alpha I, alpha bar I. Yeah, so that is that the eigenvalue will be z bar, where they are. So it will be alpha I minus alpha I. If you look at the product, it will be minus alpha I squared minus alpha squared I squared, and I squared is minus 1. So it will be a perfect square. Alpha squared will come. So the determinant of a even dimension skew symmetric matrix is a perfect square. So the square root of that is called the Pfaffian, and that is used in many other contexts. Yeah, there are versions of this Pfaffian. So we have some. I could get some result about this. You could get some. So if G is a graph with R blocks, each of which is a K3, then G has 2K plus 1 vertices that you can check. And if you remove a vertex V from a leaf block, it gives you a perfect matching, of this V minus this. And then in that you can take so this Pfaffian of this is 1. So I mean, this Pfaffian will take some time for me to explain, but essentially it says that any matrix of even order which is skew symmetric matrix of even order has determinant which is a perfect square. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. So if you look at the square root of that will give you, that is called the Pfaffian, and then this Pfaffian also I'm able to give some results about it, with respect to some order of the phi of the vertices, rows and columns. So yeah, this is okay. So this is some other another result that I had in the same circle of ideas. It follows in the same circle of ideas. So it says something about this determinant of so the determinant itself will be 1, and hence the Pfaffian will also be 1. So this Pfaffian, in general, if you want to you have to come up with some good order because of the rows and the columns. If you change it, skew symmetry and all may go. So you have to be careful about how to define this distance matrix and the skew symmetric version of it. So this distance matrix is symmetric. So I wanted to somehow break it and introduce skew symmetry. So I did it in some manner. But that's the point. The point is, and you can get some interesting results here with this Ludwig dots and this. So there are Q analog of this also that I have, and no, I don't have a Q analog of the Pfaffian result. So the Pfaffian result is just a single. It's only on numbers. I've been trying to get a Q analog and I'm stuck. For a long time now, I've been stuck on trying to get a Q analog of this Pfaffian result. Yeah. So I will end by this quote of Yeah. So Ivan Kaplansky. So Kaplansky is this. He's no more now, but so he and Halmos were good friends. So Halmos, you would have read this book. He has written several books, finite dimensional vector spaces. He has a problem book on linear algebra. Quite a few things he has. So he says, we have a philosophy about linear algebra. We think basis free. We write basis free everything. But when chips are down, we close the office door and compute with matrices like Curie. I will only add that, had he had Sage, he doesn't have to compute with matrices like Curie. He just have to give it to Sage, and it will, Curie can be passed on to the computer, and you just get the output. You just give it to the computer and read the output. I mean, he would have changed it slightly had he been, See, he was born in 1917, which is more than 100 years ago. So, and this time computers are not as prevalent as they are now. Now our mobiles are equipped with a good processor, good amount of RAM, everything. Computers have drastically changed over the years. I mean, the last decade it has changed considerably. And so 2006 it was okay. I don't think mobiles were that good. 2006 computers were there. Maybe he used, by so. No, only thing is, when chips are down, you have to compute with matrices. That's important. And because now you have computers, he used the word compute, with matrices. This is the exact quote. Yeah. And the only thing is now, because you have computers, you don't have to do the theory and all. You don't need such things. You don't have to struggle with such things. Life is much easier. And that too, if you have Sage and some other software, MATLAB, you can use MATLAB or Maple, whatever you want. It's terribly expensive. I was in the MATLAB committee in IIT. For some 200 licenses, you have to pay some 11 lakhs per year. It's terribly expensive. And some engineering departments are just hooked onto it. They cannot. It's like like drug addicts. They're addicted to it. You cannot become. So every year we have to buy. It's terrible. So we try to slowly wean them off, but it's not easy. It'll take some time. So it's better to go use some free open source software. So this is just something about exploratory math that I thought I'd share, because you have to. It's good to explore things, and you don't need too much. It's not that you need some high power lab with some precision gadgets which measure things with great precision. Nothing like that is required. Just your ability to program. If you are open to learning programming, you can learn C, C++, Python, all that, and you can learn Sage similarly. And Sage knows so much math. If you look at there are courses, math with Sage. There is this Professor Ajit. He's speaking in this workshop.
Yes, he's speaking.
Yeah. He's speaking. So he's an expert. He has called me several times. I have given several lectures on Sage with in UDCT. UDCT is now called ICT. ICT. Yeah. I'm so used to the old name. For me, it just comes the UDCT. So ICT. I've been there several times, and he's a very good expert. He has written a book on group theory with Sage recently. So you can use, and so Sage knows group theory. Sage knows ring theory. Sage knows linear algebra. Sage knows number theory. Sage knows combinatorics. Sage knows graph theory. It knows differential equations, analysis. You can compute limits with Sage. Here we struggle. Limit for at least when we teach calculus courses, single variable calculus is still okay. You move to multivariable, man. People have limit x comma y tending to alpha beta f of xy. Boy, that causes a lot of trouble. And this it's programmable. What I find surprising is a computer can do it, and we struggle for it. That shouldn't be the case. If a computer can do it, then at least we should do it. Of course, you maybe struggle to write a computer program. That is the where we are trying to teach the computer to do something. But if a computer is able to do something, then we should be able to. That level at least we should have. So yeah, this is my rough what I wanted to say, and if you have any feedback, you let me know, because I've made some rough slides for what I want for the next two lectures. But if you have, if you think I went too fast, or if I went too slow, or any other, if you have any feedback, you let me know, because I can now take that into account and then modify. So I have two more lectures, one tomorrow at the same time, and one on Saturday or Sunday. No, I don't remember, one of the two. Anyway, weekend I'm free. So
actually, on suggestion,
yeah.
Instead of saying G with the blocks or blocks, you can say G as separable graph. So that separable means G with inverted cut vertices.
See, the number of cut vertices is also a variable. What are you saying? Say that again.
Instead of saying G with R blocks, we can say G is a separable graph. So that means separable means G has a cut vertices. That's all.
Oh, any number of cut vertices.
Any number of cut vertices.
But the blocks are all the same. That is the two
No,
connected
not
blocks.
that, not that. We
See, the
can add
blocks
more
have to
than
be the same for me. In this case, no, if you look at the Graham-Hoffman,
then we can say all the blocks are isomorphics.
correct. So the number of isomorphic blocks, they are having the same number of isomorphic blocks. That's what I
Yeah,
want.
because the person from gravity ground would be
Yeah,
very
sure. Maybe
sure,
graph
yeah.
theory. Yeah. Maybe I'll try to decrease some graph theory
Yeah, okay.
background. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
can do that and try to
Thank you.
define more graph theory. Yes. Good point. Yeah. So the audience know what are they familiar with? See, linear algebra, I think they will be familiar with. Graph theory is I will try to decrease the amount of graph theory that I presume. That is one. Yeah, good point. I will do that.
So I have a question. So do automorphism groups of some of these graphs play any role? Do they have any bearing on some
No,
of
because see that automorphism graph of a tree can be it can be anything. If you look at the star, no, any vertex, any of the leaf vertices can be permuted. So that will be the automorphism group will have n-1 factorial or something. Any you can, but and if you look at the path, essentially, you can either the path or it's flip. You flip the S. That's all you have. So automorphisms are interesting, but in this case, I don't know because and if you take an automorphism, no, under an automorphism, the distance matrix will be invariant because if distances, no, are they preserved under automorphism? That's what I would think they are preserved under automorphism.
I think they are
so,
preserved.
Yeah. So then see this automorphism group, how to get it into this string of ideas? I don't know. And let me see. Yeah, I don't know. There is nothing I know of which connects the distance and automorphism. Or yeah, let me think. I don't know. Off the cuff, I'm not able to answer that. I don't see any connection, but maybe there is something. I will search a little more. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, nice talk.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So
Particularly,
I hope I didn't go very fast. That's my only thing. The worry is, I want more
Yes,
people to,
yes, professor, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you.
We can,
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. If you have any feedback, let me know. Yeah, definitely. And even you can tell them to Professor Ganesh.
Because we can visualize things. We can go for 2 slides. You passed on.
Oh, I see.
No,
Yeah.
That's
Too
many parameters you have to visualize. No.
Correct.
That will be easy for you, but for us,
yeah.
very
First time,
difficult.
it's not straightforward. Yeah, it takes some time getting used. So I can send the slides to Professor Ganesh or whoever.
Oh,
so that
definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I will send the slides to Professor Ganesh today.
Yeah.
I have his WhatsApp number, so I can send it. If there's a
Sure.
group, you can share it. Definitely. All right. Okay. So thank you very much. So we'll meet tomorrow.
Thanks.
Take care,
a lot.
everybody. Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Yeah.